Hi, I'm Rob Cosman. Welcome to my shop. We incorporated our business in 2015, and our focus has been to design and build tools that make hand tool woodworking more enjoyable and more efficient. I've got our top sellers from 2023, our 10 best, in here. I'm going to share it with you. We had a busy year in 2023, so I asked Luther to pull the data and show me what our 10 best sellers in terms of numbers were for 2023. Now, I probably could have guessed about half of them, but some of them came as a real surprise. In fact, one of them only became available partway through the year, so that's done extremely well. And I've got them all in my replica of a 17th century French-Canadian traveler's chest. How appropriate for a Canadian woodworker. I'm going to pull them out. I'm going to go through each one and show you how it's used. We'll start with number 10. We'll work our way up to number 1. You just won't be able to stand the excitement. Hey, before you go any further, why don't you leave a comment below on what your guess would be for the top 10 tools. See how many of them you actually get. See if you can beat me. Number 10. This actually was one of the late entries of the year. We've only had it for about half of the year. And it's called the hand plane shooting grip. I'm going to show you how I use it. My son Jake actually developed this. It's cast aluminum. It's got an optional sleeve on there to just improve the grip. And it's actually really simple to install in your plane. It does require drilling a hole in the side of your plane. Users won't mind that. It's got a little brass 1/4 inch diameter pin. Has a hole down through the middle, 1/8 of an inch. So before you use it, obviously, you're going to wind that back so that it's not sticking out the bottom. You put it in position where you want it. I like to have it really close to the blade so I have lots of control. And then hold it in position and you drill down through the center of that pin with your 1/8 inch drill bit, which gives you your pilot hole. And then on your drill press you can finish with a 1/4 inch hole, about 3/16 of an inch deep. And then you wind your brass pin down all the way. You'll notice there's also a magnet in there, and there's 2 little oval head set screws that help take any of the slop out. And now when it comes to planing, you have so much grip and so much control. I love it. In fact, I don't use it without it, just to save my hand and to make it that much easier. That was number 10, the grip. Number 9. This has been around a long time. In fact, this was one of the very first products that we did. This is a fret saw. Now, I cut a lot of dovetails. The only thing I do more than cutting dovetails is teach other people how to cut dovetails. And when it comes time to removing the waste, particularly all that area right in there between your 2 pins, you can whack away at it with a chisel, which is a lot of banging and crashing, or you can take a fret saw. Now, this is what we do to modify it. And this all came from me trying to make it more comfortable to use. The handle was notorious for coming off, so we drill and pin it. And then it was such a small handle, it was very hard to grip, so we wrap it with stick tape. That's what these bumps are. And then we put a layer of extra grippy tape on it, which really increases your control. It doesn't have a very deep throat, but it's nicely balanced. So in order to get access to something wider than what you would have here, we put the blade in and give it a little twist, top and bottom. And now when you're making a horizontal cut, the frame is actually up here, and you can go as far as you need to. Wing nut allows you to get lots of tension. Use a thin blade. We use a 12.5 teeth per inch skip tooth blade. The skip tooth means where there normally would be 3 teeth, there's only 2, and that allows it to clear the waste faster so you can get a much faster cut. Now the reason I use it is because it's a blade that's thin enough that it'll go down the kerf left by the dovetail saw. Now you'll notice that when you do that, you have to lay it over because you've twisted the blade, go right down to the bottom, kind of get a feel for where it is, come up a little bit, turn it, and then start sawing. And some people have difficulty in the beginning, but just go slow, watch where it's cutting, get as close to that line as you can. The less material you leave, the less chiseling there is to do. And in this case, as you get near the end, you got to remember that's on an angle, so you've got to swing it over a little bit. And out goes your waste. Fret saw. Number 8, this one's been around a long time. I wasn't surprised. It's been very popular. This is our dovetail mark knife. Kind of hard to see it in the packaging, so here it is. We actually have 2 varieties. now that we have what's called a 3/4 saw, but I'll just show you exactly how this gets used. Like I said, the only thing I do more than cut dovetails is teach other people how to do it. And the problem was, and is, trying to find a thin knife mark that we used to do in order to lay out your pins. And it would be so hard to see, and I'd have the bench lamp shining in different directions trying to pick it up. Let me show you how we do it now. After we use our Sean shim, you'll hear about that later, we go in with this knife. Now that blade is the exact same as the blade in the dovetail saw. And I first found out about this technique through a man named Ernest Joyce that wrote a book way back in 1971, the Encyclopedia of Furniture Making. And the technique I thought was great because it didn't allow for the blade or the knife to move side to side. Before you remove the waste, after you've made the saw cuts, you simply put that knife down inside the saw curve, and as you can tell, it can no longer move, and then you drag it through. And you do that 3, 4, 5 times, depending on the species, but here's the big advantage. When it comes time to cutting, what you would have to do is pay attention to this line and the line down the face to make your pin cut plumb. Now all you do is come along, set that in there. You no longer have to worry about that. You can focus solely on the plumb cut, and away you go. Makes a huge difference in people learning how to cut dovetails. It almost makes it bulletproof. Number 7. Jake's going to take over. This is the second in the top 10 that he developed. So inside there are kits of hex screws. Let me tell you what I mean. If you use a hand plane, you know what it's like, especially on brass screws. They get all chewed up. I'm going to show you another one that's even more so. So Jake got the idea of switching all the primary screws, which would be this one, the screw that holds the blade and chip breaker together, and the 3 screws underneath here if you have a bedrock style plane that allow you to adjust your frog without disassembling everything. So nice when you can now put that in there and it doesn't fall out and it doesn't get chewed up. It comes in really handy when you're using the screw to hold the chip breaker to the blade. It's just a really good idea. And the other nice advantage, if you've got a traditional style bedrock plane, trying to access those screws and get around your adjuster knob made it really tough. Well, with this ball hex on there, you can get at it from multiple or any angle and go in there and tighten that up or loosen it, whatever you need to do. So great way to up the advantages of using a hand plane, or being able to adjust it, I should say. And that is number 7. Number 6, I need to give credit to a combat wounded vet named Sean McDermott. Sean came to my class in 2017, came up with an idea. We turned it into a product. We named it after him, and we pay him a royalty in every one of them. He's thrilled. This is called the Sean shim. So back to that idea I saw that was written in the text, Encyclopedia of Furniture Making. This was the way to improve that technique. It has 4 different settings. That stands for thousandths of an inch, and it's the amount of offset between the top piece and the bottom piece. If you don't understand this, we'll leave a link below to me showing you how to lay out dovetails. But what you have to do is move the top piece over by the thickness of a saw kerf in order to prevent that technique of using your dovetail marking knife to keep it from cutting into your pin. So what you do is use whichever setting you want. In this case, it would be 24 thousandths of an inch. Move it over like that, and that automatically gives you your setting. You want the joint to be a little bit tighter, you can actually go to 25, and that'll make it a little tighter yet. Works incredibly well. It's just it's one of the best additions to our dovetail process that I think we've ever come up with. Maybe second only to the saw. Number 5. Hone rate. Now, sharpening is the lifeblood of hand tool woodworking. And if you use a combination of metal or diamond stones that are on a metal plate and ceramic stones or water stones, then you have to have something that's compatible with both. Of course, water stones and ceramic stones use water. Diamond stones use oil. They don't mix. So what we found is a product out of England. It's called Hone Rate. Really concentrated. That little bottle I showed you makes 4 liters. So it goes 6 liters? 6 liters. So it goes a long way. Just throw it in there and use that as your lubricant. And what it does, it's a rust inhibitor. So it inhibits water from rusting metal. I wouldn't leave my stone laying in it, but certainly it can dry on the surface and you don't have to worry about surface rust after the fact. Not that expensive, but sure makes it a lot simpler than trying to work with oil and wiping all that off and then using water. Hone right. Well, number 4, and by the way, most all of these are just things that we've come up with that made working easier, more convenient. That last one, hone right, instead of having the hassle of switching water to oil, you've got that one product right there and it's just easy to do. Number 4. This one has been around a long time. You could actually say that this is what put us on the map, and it's our dovetail saw. Now, I use it a lot, teach other people to use it a lot, and it was that process that led to this development. I used to sell another brand, and while it cut nice and fast, it was very difficult to start. And if you can't start your saw accurately, it doesn't matter how fast it cuts, you're in the wrong spot anyway. So we had to cure that problem, and a lot of the folks that I teach are up in their 60s, they're just getting started at this. They don't have 10 years to get this figured out. They'd like to do it now. So I came up with a saw, and the first feature is the first 2 inches have 22 teeth per inch. So from the tip to right there, instead of having 15 teeth per inch like these big ones, they're small teeth. And you can't see it because you have to get really close, but they actually have a negative cutting face. So these ones back here have a 0-degree cutting face, makes it very aggressive. These are relaxed at about 25, 30 degrees. What that means is when you come to your piece of wood, it takes very little effort to do that. And just enough to catch your thumbnail, or in this case, hold your saw in that spot. So when you meet the big teeth, boom, there's your speed. Now, what did we add to that? Well, a heavy brass back. Actually increased the length so that we could use those 2 inches for starting, but not take away from your ability to cut accurately and quickly by having too short of a blade. So we lengthened the blade, made a heavy saw, so we had to get a material for the handle that would balance that saw appropriately. And we've gone through a couple different materials, but the one we've settled on is nice. It's actually made out of a wood fiber with resin in it. It's impervious to water, very comfortable, heavy, strong, just works beautifully. And the blade, while it's only 20 thousandths of an inch thick, the set, which means how far each tooth is bent out from the plate itself, is just 2 thousandths of an inch per side. What does that mean? Well, when you're making your saw cut, if the set is very narrow, it touches the blade on either side and it keeps that saw going in a straight line. If you're having to steer your saw, very difficult to come off and get a really good straight cut. And the advantage of a straight cut is it produces a very flat surface. So what do you do for a really good glue joint? Well, you have 2 flat, smooth surfaces, and then they go together without any gaps. And in some cases, the joint actually disappears. So if we take this piece that we just cut off and we put that piece back on there with it, you can almost make that joint completely disappear. Up against the side of a pin or tail, you get a wonderful glue joint. Nothing has to be done to it after the fact, meaning you don't have to come in with a chisel. It allows you to assemble your joint saw cut to saw cut. It's an open pistol grip. So we actually incorporated this right from the beginning because I wanted it to be comfortable. I wanted it to be the type that whether you're in a dark room or a light room, you can tell where the blade is based on the feel of the handle. In fact, we use the same handle on all of our saws. So everything you do with any saw is reinforcing your muscle memory so you know where plumb is, and in the case of dovetails, 10 degrees to the left, 10 degrees to the right. Real comfortable. My favorite tool, we've made thousands of them, and if you want to cut dovetails and you want to get it right in the first couple of days, there you go. Number 3. Now this I have to bring up the original inventor, and that was David Charlesworth. And although it's not a big item, it sure will change the way you sharpen. And it's our steel rule for sharpening. So David Charlesworth, who was a well-known English craftsman, died a few years ago, developed a technique that has come to known as the Charlesworth ruler trick. And what it does, it speeds up your sharpening from something that would take 10 minutes to something that takes 32 seconds. Speaking of which, I'll leave a link below on our 32 seconds to sharp. And the whole idea was, instead of flattening and polishing the entire back of your blade, only to use that little bit out here, using a little thin steel rule on the edge of the stone, you would lay your blade down, within 1/4 of an inch of the opposite edge, elevated less than a degree, and then you would go in and it would produce a little wee flat polished surface right there, minimizing what you have to do in order to get an effective cutting edge, along the same line as we use micro bevels on the other side of the bevel side. The Charlesworth ruler trick. Now this one we actually have made. It doesn't have any of the little serrations like you typically have with the ones that come as a rule, which is nice and smooth and just a little more comfortable to use. Number 2, suspense is building. Another big shout out coming here. This is our magic wax. Now, Kevin Burris is a good friend of mine. Kevin is a combat wounded vet. He was 22 years Army EOD. That stands for Explosive Ordnance Disposal. These were the guys that went out and found those roadside bombs and dismantled them before they took out our guys. And I worked with Kevin closely. Kevin brought this to our attention way back in 2019. And wow, what a great product. What a great delivery system. It's our number 2 selling item. So if you're planing, your effort should be spent pushing the blade through the wood. However, a lot of your effort is spent pushing the plane over the wood, the friction. So we actually worked with the manufacturer in 3 or 4 different, was it the 3rd or 4th different formula? We finally got what we were looking for. Something that was hard enough that it would only leave a light film and soft enough that it would leave somewhat of a film. So in this nice little container with a roll-up top, you just give it a long squiggly S, and now it cuts that friction probably by 3/4, and it becomes effortless, and you can focus on what you're trying to do with the plane instead of the effort required to push the plane over the wood. If you haven't tried this, and you can get a wax to do it, the only wax candle. The only problem I've found with wax candles is one might be just right, and the next one is really cakey, and it leaves a bunch of residue on the sole of the plane. This one seems to work just perfectly. I didn't even have to look. I knew what it was. And instead of a drum roll, I'm just going to enjoy the sound of a sharp blade pulling off a thin shaving of wood. So relaxing, so calming, so peaceful. It's our adjustar. So we'll dig it out. There's actually 2 different sizes. Now let me explain the history behind this. All planes have a mechanism designed to advance the blade for a thicker shaving or retract the blade for a thinner shaving. And it's always been a knob. There was a time when it was a very small diameter knob, which only further complicated the process. They never had enough knurling on them to really get a good bite. And under the pressure of the lever cap, it was very hard to turn. I'd have to stop and actually use 2 fingers to do it. Well, we got to thinking about this a few years ago and thought, isn't there something better? And we came up with a 5-spoked wheel as a retrofit for any plane. And now, instead of having to stop, you just put your finger on the side of that one of those paddles, and you can bring that blade out as far as you need for a heavy shaving, or you can retract it with a spin of a finger for a much lighter shaving. Works extremely well on the shooting board because, again, you don't have to stop. You can just sit there with your finger and push down on the paddle a little bit to advance it, or the other way to retract it. Now the problem was that the one size we initially started with would only fit 4.5s and above. So this year we came out with a smaller version for planes that are narrow, like the number 4, number 3, in this case the 10 1/4. Works just as well, just better in tight cramped quarters. I must admit that this is probably my favorite improvement that we've had in hand planes, and I get lots of emails from older woodworkers telling me that they haven't been able to use their plane in 10 years, 15 years because of arthritis, and now they can. So, such a great benefit. And hand planing is such a, wow, it's just such a peaceful process. I sit there in the shop sometimes and just do nothing but this. So, bring a little bit of peace back into your life. The adjustar. Hope you've enjoyed this. Hope it didn't come off sounding like a big long infomercial. But all of these products are things that we utilize every day in the shop, and we share them with other folks. And like I said, it's designed to make hand tool woodworking more enjoyable and more convenient. Hope you enjoyed this. See you. If you like my work and enjoy my style of teaching, click on any one of these videos and help take your woodworking to the next level. I've always said, better tools make the job so much easier. If you click on the link below, the chisel and plane icon, it'll take you to our site and introduce you to all the tools that we actually manufacture right here in our shop. It'll also give you information on our online and in-person workshops.